Another U-turn from Labour as the government looks set to row back on plans to introduce mandatory digital ID cards.
The flagship policy fell flat with the public, with nearly 3 million people signing a petition against the plan after it was announced. And our political correspondent Louisa James is in Westminster. Louisa, we're going to be speaking the next half hour to the Transport Secretary about Northern Rail expansion, but once again, she's also going to have to explain another U-turn in another policy area, the 13th U-turn since Keir Starmer became Prime Minister.
Imagine waking up in a country where your very existence, your right to earn a crust, pay your mortgage and contribute to society is dependent on a digital flickering light on your smartphone. Now imagine that same government, the one that swore blind this was essential for the nation's security, suddenly performing a backflip so spectacular it would make an Olympic gymnast dizzy, all while looking you dead in the eye and pretending they haven't moved an inch. Welcome to the surreal world of Sir Keir Starmer's Britain, where mandatory apparently means whenever we feel like it, and transparency is just a fancy word for hiding behind a digital screen. Piers has had enough, Kate McCann has had enough, and quite frankly, the British public is starting to wonder if the steering wheel at number 10 is actually connected to anything at all. Today, we are dissecting the absolute carnage that ensued when the government tried to sell a U-turn as a straight line. And trust me, it is not a pretty sight. Quick favour, if you are loving this deep dive into the absolute circus of Westminster, hit that subscribe button. Over 92% of viewers haven't yet, and honestly, we need you on board to keep holding these politicians to account. It is free, takes a second, and means the world to us here at the British Report. Thanks if you did. Now back to the show. The airwaves were crackling with tension this morning as Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander stepped into the ring with Times Radio's Kate McCann. It was supposed to be a standard government soft soap session, but it quickly turned into a masterclass in political evasion. The topic, digital ID cards. You remember them, the mandatory policy that Sir Keir Starmer personally championed just a few months ago. The government has now performed its 13th major U-turn in just 18 months, dropping the requirement for workers to sign up for a specific digital ID scheme. But instead of just admitting they got it wrong, Alexander tried to play a game of linguistic twister that left everyone listening with a headache. Kate McCann, to her absolute credit, wasn't having any of it. She skewered the minister with the kind of precision usually reserved for a high-end surgeon. When asked if the cards would be compulsory by 2029, Alexander didn't just dodge the question, she practically sprinted in the opposite direction. She kept repeating the phrase, mandatory digital rights to work checks, a clever little bit of wordplay designed to sound like the original policy while being fundamentally different. McCann's response was legendary. She told the minister, please give our listeners the benefit of being honest with them because you are not being honest. It was the sound of a journalist finally snapping after being fed one too many prepared talking points. It is a classic political tactic. If you cannot change the facts, change the vocabulary. It is like telling someone you haven't cancelled your gym membership, you've just optimised your participation to 0%. McCann pointed out that Alexander was dancing on the head of a pin with clever language, and the frustration was palpable. How can the public trust a single word that comes out of Whitehall when ministers refuse to acknowledge a U-turn that is as obvious as a double-decker bus in a library? This isn't just a minor tweak, it is a fundamental shift in a flagship policy that was sold as the only way to secure our borders and stop illegal working.
I think the budget is going to be a shambles, and I think she'll be gone by Christmas.
How high would you say the stakes are for both the Chancellor and the Prime Minister?
It's already been a complete shambles. The Labour government has been a complete shambles. To take the scale of majority they had, and in this tiny period of time, just basically disintegrate before our very eyes, has been really quite astounding to watch. I think Rachel Reeves is completely out of her depth. I don't think she's got a clue what she's doing. I'm not sure Keir Starmer has much of a clue about what to do about this. I think the budget is going to be a shambles, and I think she'll be gone by Christmas.
How? How on earth would she be gone by Christmas?
She'll have to go.
You know what happens with the bond markets when she cried, and that.
Well, that alone. I'm sorry, call me old-fashioned. I don't want to see my Chancellor of the Exchequer sobbing during PMQs.
I'm not talking about her crying. I'm talking about the reaction of the bond markets, which they would appear to like Rachel Reeves as Chancellor if she does what she says she's going to do?
I think she's been a shockingly bad Chancellor. Nothing against her personally, but she is Rachel from accounts. And that, by the way, I think that's offensive to actual people called Rachel who work in accounts and probably do a competent
She was a
job.
senior Bank of England economist.
Well, I've seen no sign of any competence. I'm sorry.
Naturally, Piers Morgan was watching and he didn't miss a beat. Sharing the clip with his millions of followers on X, he launched a blistering attack on the government's integrity. He argued that there is one thing worse than this government's endless U-turns, and that is slippery lying ministers pretending they haven't done a U-turn when it's so obvious they have. Morgan's intervention has amplified the row, turning a radio interview into a national scandal about the very nature of political honesty. When you have nearly 3 million people signing a petition against digital IDs, you'd think the government might be a bit more humble about their retreat. But humility doesn't seem to be in the Labour handbook this year. This brings us to the man at the top, Sir Keir Starmer. To understand why this U-turn is so humiliating, you have to look back at his own words from last year. He stood before the nation and said, "Let me spell it out. You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID. It's as simple as that." There was no ambiguity, no consultation, no relaxed approach. It was a digital ultimatum. Now, Chancellor Rachel Reeves says she is pretty relaxed about what form the ID takes. The simple as that has become complicated as this, and the authority of the Prime Minister is taking another massive hit. The problem with 13 U-turns in 18 months isn't just the policy changes, it's the message it sends to the world. It says that the British government is currently being run by a team that checks the wind direction before they check the data.
As you know, he's had 4 years. He can't tell you what he would do differently because he doesn't have a plan. And if you don't have a plan, you can't deliver any change. Nothing will change for the better, whereas I can do that for people.
Here's what I say at the end, is that Keir Starmer has resolutely not delivered on his pledges to do an interview with me for Piers Morgan Uncensored. You've now done 2 in the space of the last year. I appreciate that. I think you do put yourself up to be held to account more than he does.
As we look toward 2029, the landscape of British privacy is still under threat. The optional digital ID is just a de facto mandatory system in waiting. If every bank, every landlord and every employer starts asking for the one login or the gov.uk wallet, then it doesn't matter if it's legally optional. You'll be forced to have it just to function in society. This is the creeping normalisation that has people like Piers Morgan so fired up. It's the boiling frog theory of governance. They don't take your liberty all at once. They just turn up the heat one voluntary digital app at a time. The reality is that this government is suffering from U-turn overwhelm. They are so busy trying to fix the mistakes of last week that they are making the mistakes of next month. Rachel Reeves says she is relaxed, but the public certainly isn't. When the Chancellor of the Exchequer says she doesn't care what form your ID takes, as long as it's digital, she is admitting that the government has no clear plan. They are just throwing digital spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. Meanwhile, the cost of these abandoned experiments continues to climb, and the trust in our institutions continues to fall. Kate McCann's interview with Heidi Alexander will go down as a defining moment of this Parliament. It exposed the clever language and the pin dancing for exactly what it is, a desperate attempt to save face in the middle of a policy collapse. Piers Morgan's skewering of the government has hit a nerve because it perfectly captures the national mood. We are tired of the spin, we are tired of the backflips, and we are certainly tired of being told that mandatory doesn't mean compulsory. If the government wants to lead, they need to start being honest with the people they serve. In the end, this isn't just about ID cards or right-to-work checks. It's about a government that seems to have lost its way before it even reached the halfway mark of its first term. Sir Keir Starmer promised stability, but what we have is a political seesaw. One day we are going all in on digital surveillance, and the next we are pretty relaxed about the whole thing. It is a shambles, it is a farce, and as Piers Morgan so correctly put it, it is slippery. The British Report will be right here, watching every twist and every turn, because if there is one thing we can guarantee in Starmer's Britain, it's that another U-turn is just around the corner. Thank you for watching.